everybody, Dana here, and I'm sorry that I took a while to get back to making videos, but, got busy, and life happens, and I'm sure you all understand. So, this week I wanted to talk a little bit about short stories and flash fiction. Right now, on the Short Story and Flash Fiction Society website, we are doing a blog tour. We're trying to promote our anthology called Reunion, just trying to, get a little bit more traction for the book and share it with people. So I wanted to put together this video and talk about writing short stories and flash fiction and why I like writing it. I like writing longer works too, but I do enjoy short stories and flash fiction. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about really horrible ways to start the stories and kind of gimmicks that I think you should avoid. And obviously, with every rule, there's an exception. There are ways that things can be done that I might not cover here, or you could think of examples of authors who have broken these rules and been successful, so keep that in mind, obviously, but generally speaking, the things I'm going to cover are things you should probably try to avoid when you're writing short stories and flash fiction. When you're writing flash fiction, that's generally considered to be 1,000 words or shorter. That means you don't have a lot of space to tell a fully fledged story. So when you're starting out a flash fiction story, do not do exposition, do not do info dump. The same goes for short stories, except you do have a little bit more room to play around here because, depending on the sources that you look at, some short stories are considered to be into 15,000 words. Some people say anything under 10,000 words is a short story. So, it really depends, but you do have a little bit more wiggle room with that. So obviously, if you're writing something that's a little bit longer, you have room to develop your characters a little bit and kind of do a little bit of world building and that sort of thing. So, my suggestions beyond don't do a bunch of random background information that doesn't really help propel your short story or flash fiction forward. Openings to avoid. You can probably Google this and find that there are a lot of people in agreement with me. And again, there are people who've broken these rules and have been successful with it. But for those of us who are just mere mortals, these are things that you probably want to avoid. 1. Do not start your story with your character waking up from a dream or not knowing where he or she is. This is probably one of the most annoying tropes that I see people use, hear judges and editors and agents complain about. Nobody cares. It's so overdone. All it is a way for you to do some background development, some history or whatever, without actually doing it in an artful, thoughtful kind of way. Another thing that some people do is starting off, especially with fantasy stories, for some reason it's some person out in the woods gathering herbs or getting water or something. And I'm wary of these scenes in general because I feel like they're thrown in there mostly to show gentle feminine nature. You don't usually see guys out in the woods gathering things. My point is, don't start with some little scene where they're all daydreaming and they're out in the woods and they're gathering things. In science fiction stories, a lot of the time you see people trying to develop worlds and give background information about characters, and one character will talk and then they'll say, "So the son of the leader of this planet, which is in this galaxy, and here's the history of this galaxy, and here's how far away it was from the galaxy where the other guy is from that he's talking to." And it's just okay, well, could we just build this into the story? Please do not start your story with this vast and great history. And whatever you do not start out your story with your character dressing and looking in a mirror and pointing out all of his or her physical attributes. Nobody wants to read that crap. And you know what? I was guilty of doing it when I first started writing. I was just I don't really know how to describe my character, so she's going to be getting dressed for her first day of school. Nobody wants to read that. What they want to read is your character getting involved in some sort of problem, within the first chapter, or people are going to put your book down. And now a little bit about endings. The hallmark of flash fiction is a little bit of a twist at the end, primarily because you don't have enough time to really develop an in-depth story with a bunch of twists and turns, so rather than having twists and turns in the middle of the story, you tend to have them at the end. We'll keep the reader in the dark the whole time about where this character actually is, or who this character is actually talking to, the reality of the situation that they're in. This is going to go back to the first thing I mentioned. Do not say, "But it was all a dream." Again, I feel cheated as a reader if I find that in a story. I could tell you about my dream from last night and it would probably be just as exciting and vivid to me, but to you, your eyes are gonna glaze over. You don't care what I was dreaming about, so why would I care to waste my time reading the story about this character dreaming? And I don't know, I'm a little bit harsh on the dream thing, I know, but I feel like it's lazy most of the time. With short stories, you can find ways to put twists and turns into the plot. Obviously not so much as you would with a novel, but you can still do it. As for the ending of short stories, the same thing goes as with flash fiction. Don't do a cheap, gimmicky, cop-out kind of ending because you can't figure out what else to write. Short stories do take some planning. And on my blog, I actually have something that can help you develop a short story plot and like story arc, and I will link to it at the bottom of this video so you can check it out if you want. But generally speaking, you know, you start off with a problem, you come to this climax, you might throw in like one twist and then, you know, the story kind of tapers down from there. You don't have enough room to really develop some extremely complicated story. You pretty much have to kind of keep on an almost linear track. Otherwise, have you ever read a short story where it just seems like too much info is crammed into it? It almost starts to look contrived and cheesy. There's too many twists. It's just like, it seems overdone. So I would keep it at a very simple story arc with a twist and then a denouement at the end where you can kind of explain everything, answer any questions that need to be tied up, and if, you know, it's a serial of short stories, you can end it with a little hook so that you can get right back into that story in the next issue or episode or whatever. That about covers it. Obviously, these were all my opinions, and you can take them or leave them. Many of these things editors and agents do agree with. In order to impress people nowadays, you really have to try and break the mold. You can't be doing the same tired stuff. Imagine if you got hundreds of submissions throughout the week, and 75% of them started with one of these tropes. How sick of it would you be? Would you even be willing to read past that first part? Probably not. I mean, I know I wouldn't. I would get really tired of it really fast. So you have to try and find ways to be unique, and these sorts of things don't work very well in novels, let alone short stories and flash fiction. You have a very short window to impress somebody with those short fiction genres, and you need to do your very best to hook that reader and get them to read the rest of your story. All right, and one last thing. Why do I like writing short stories and flash fiction so much? Because it's a brain dump for me. And I say it's a brain dump, and that makes it sound like it's just effortless. It's not. But it is really nice for me to get these ideas out of my head, because I'll end up having so many at once that I couldn't possibly write that many novels or longer stories. So instead I can turn them into shorter stories or flash fiction and just kind of satisfy my need to talk about that idea and get it out of the way. And if you end up putting them together in an anthology, you have a whole collection of stories that people can read and enjoy, and you wouldn't have had to take that whole year to write a novel based on one little idea that you had one day. Another reason I like them is because, especially with anthologies, it is really nice to see the work of different authors, or on even stories by the same author on a similar subject that you can just sit down and read in one sitting, or you could read a story a day or something like that, and it only takes a few minutes and you've satisfied that need to read a story, but you haven't had to invest as much time in it as a reader as you would if you were to, say, read a novel. So again, this is a video that I just kind of threw together to talk about maybe a little bit of pet peeves regarding, you know, cliches in storytelling, but also because the ending and the beginnings of flash fiction and short stories they make the entire thing. I know that sounds really obvious to say, and obviously it goes for any sort of writing, but especially with these short ones, you do not have a lot of time to catch people's interest, and you need to make sure that it counts. You can't waste your words, you have to use them wisely. If you haven't, check out the Short Story and Flash Fiction Society. We'd love it if you bought a copy of Reunions. It is an anthology, and it's a really eclectic, unique collection of stories that I think you'll really like. And I will put the links below so you can check that out on Amazon. So with that, I'm going to show you some cats. Happy writing, and until next time, I'm Dana Firth. There's Umi. Hi, sweetie. Yes, okay, thank you. I think you are. There's Mo. She sleeps in like every video I make. What a cutie.